Imagine you and the guy you sat next to in college start jobs the exact same week. You are both 31 years old. You both put $10,000 into a 401k on the exact same Tuesday afternoon. And you both pick the exact same boring total stock market index fund. You never touch it again for 35 years. Over that 35-year timeline, you experience the same market, crashes, and discipline. But at the end, you end up with $656,000. Jonathan finishes with over $815,000. $159,000 of your money is simply gone. You didn't panic sell at the bottom of a recession. You didn't chase a heavily shorted meme stock. You didn't do a single thing wrong with your asset allocation. The gap exists because of variables you were never told were financial decisions. Most advice focuses on what you control, which fund to pick or how much to save. But the actual payout often depends on the invisible environmental factors surrounding your money you aren't looking. To understand why the environment matters more than the specific stock pick, we have to look at how quickly the mechanics of retirement shifted. In 1975, private sector pensions had 27 million active participants, while 401k-style plans had just 11 million. By 2023, those numbers had completely inverted. Inside a single working lifetime, the entire structure flipped. We took market risk, longevity risk, and portfolio management, three extremely complex jobs previously handled by institutions with actual actuaries on staff, and we dropped all three onto the individual employee's desk. We slid it in between the dental plan and the parking pass, provided zero training, and wished everybody luck. A $44,000 median 401k balance in the United States is the direct mathematical result of assigning institutional-level risk management to average working people who were never given the tools to do the job. Let's go back to that $159,000 gap between you and Jonathan. Jonathan works for a massive hospital system. You work at a small dental supply company. When you get a 401k, your employer picks an administrator in a conference room you will never see. Somebody has to pay the record keeper, the auditor, and the compliance people. At Jonathan's plan, that bill is split across 30,000 employees. At yours, it is split across 41. Because of that headcount, you pay 1% in administrative fees, while Jonathan pays less than 0.1% for the exact same index fund. This line graph compares that 0.1% fee trajectory against your 1% fee over 35 years, assuming a very realistic savings rate of $6,000 a year. A 1% fee sounds like a tiny rounding error, but compounded over decades, that gap creates a massive deficit that fills in red. That is $159,000 extracted from your identical fund in the identical market. This $159,000 deficit is enough to pay off a house in most of the country, or provide roughly 90 years of the median American's monthly retirement income. It is a massive friction point applied to your wealth, based entirely on your company's headcount. If you try to avoid those plan fees by investing on your own, you will run into the commission-free retail brokerage apps. Over the last decade, trading fees collapsed to zero, which is genuinely great for retail investors. But it raises a serious math question. If nobody makes money off your trades, how do these apps post billions in net income? This flowchart outlines payment for order flow. When you tap buy on a commission-free app, your order usually never reaches a stock exchange. Instead, a wholesale market maker pays the brokerage for the right to fill your order in-house. That fraction of a penny per share doesn't look like much until you multiply it by a few 100 million trades. But look at this secondary loop on the chart. This represents the cash sweep. Whatever money you leave sitting uninvested in your account gets swept into a partner bank. The app earns high institutional interest rates on your sleeping money, sometimes upwards of 5%, and they pay you a fraction of a percent in return. In 2024, Robinhood earned over $1 billion in net interest income, making it a larger revenue source than trading itself. On these platforms, your idle cash and your inattention are the actual products generating the revenue. To escape the app gamification, you follow the classic advice: hold almost no cash, don't trade, and buy one broad index fund, like the S&P 500, until you retire. It is highly disciplined. The catch is that the index you bought didn't sit still while you were holding it. This pie chart represents the 500 companies inside that broad index. By the end of 2025, just 10 of those companies grew to absorb roughly 40% of the entire index's volume. For context, at the absolute peak of the dot-com bubble, the top 10 companies held under 27%. Now, those 10 modern companies genuinely produce massive profits. They earn their market value. But the price of admission to own them has stretched significantly past historical averages. When you buy a fund holding 500 companies, 40 cents of every dollar lands on about 10 tech giants. You own 500 companies the way a fruit salad with one strawberry in it contains strawberries. The conventional wisdom of buying the whole market currently requires you to pay a premium for severe sector concentration. This brings us to a third investor, Preston. Also 31, he operates on an entirely different rulebook. Preston skips the public stock exchange entirely to secure pre-IPO allocations in private companies. Because modern companies spend their explosive growth years entirely private, by the time a stock hits the public market for you to buy, the massive early gains have already been distributed behind closed doors. Preston gets to walk through those doors because of a 1982 rule defining an accredited investor. The SEC set high income and net worth requirements to protect average people from risky private markets. They then left those Dallenkosh holds completely untouched for over 40 years. Inflation slowly rotted the fence, allowing millions of high earners like Preston to quietly walk through. Once Preston accumulates those private gains, he executes a strategy literally known in tax circles as buy, borrow, die. Instead of selling assets and paying heavy capital gains taxes to the IRS, he takes out low-interest, securities-backed lines of credit against his portfolio to fund his life. He pays less interest than you pay in taxes, and when he dies, his heirs receive a stepped-up cost basis, wiping out the tax burden. Preston's wealth compounds under rules that public market investors are legally prevented from using. By accessing a separate regulatory and tax code written in the 1980s, he captures the growth curves and tax efficiencies that exist on the other side of the gate. This scale visualization weighs the corporate equity ownership of American households. As of late 2025, the top 1% of U.S. households owns 50% of the entire stock market. The bottom half of the entire country owns roughly 1%. Spread across 160 million people, a 1% share is an ownership structure performing exactly as it was designed to perform. You do not need to despair, because despite these layers of extraction, you have access to the cheapest, most efficient investing tools in recorded history. Retail investors can buy total market funds for 3 basis points and pay 0 commissions to trade them. The active steps to protect yourself are entirely within your reach. First, find out exactly what your employer is costing you. Ask your HR department for your 404A-5 fee disclosure document. Almost nobody asks to see it. It contains the exact administrative drag applied to your retirement. Second, open your brokerage app and manually check the sweep interest rate on your uninvested cash. If the platform is paying you a fraction of a percent while the federal funds rate sits much higher, move your cash to an account that pays you the yield. The core rule for the rest of your financial life is extremely simple. Before you click buy, borrow, or hold, ask yourself who gets paid when you take that action, and whether they would still make money if you did the boring thing instead.